Sahana Bhavatu Sahanau Bhunuktu Saha Viryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavaditam Astu Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May that one protect us both. May that one nourish us both. May we work together with great energy, and may our study be full of illumination. May we not unnecessarily cower with each other. Peace, peace, peace be unto all. So it's been some time since we met and studied this Katha Upanishad, one of the most beautiful Upanishads, and one of the most easy Upanishads. Easy meaning it's a complex subject which is put in story form. And so this story, just to remind you, is about the very young Nachiketa, whose father has determined to host and give a sacrifice, sacrificing everything, all his possessions he's giving off, with the understanding that I'll gain immortal life if I do that. Immortal life being understood to be some post-mortem condition, a realm of the ancestors. And so essentially, the sacrifice is going to the first person who died historically, that is called Yama. And as the name suggests, is a master over this question of immortality, but he's done it because of this quality of his self-control. And so not only does he know the realms in a post-mortem condition, but he also knows the means. And so what a wonderful teacher Nachiketa gets. But just to remind you of the story in summary form. So what he does is Nachiketa finds himself in the realm of death because he's asking his father, who will you send me to? Who will you give me to? Since you have to give all your possessions away, and I'm your son, I must be one of those possessions. And actually, it's seen as a criticism that he's not offering the best that there is to offer. That is the father. And so the father gets angry. And Satyameva Jati, truth alone must triumph. Every word comes to pass. And so Nachiketa finds himself in the realm of Yama, and he has to wait for him because even in the realm of the gods, they have to go here and there on business. And so 3 wishes are granted him in compensation for this. And in this first series of passages, it comes to light that there are 3 principal duties. Duty to the father, the mother, and the teacher. And that is commensurate with the 3 wishes also. The 3 wishes being that the father be satisfied, the father be calmed. And so it infers that there is a return to life because the father will be calmed when he recognizes his son return from this realm. And immediately this indicates to us the perpetuality of life, that there is no such thing as absolute death, that even in early days it was understood that somebody can come back from death and carry on a journey, but a journey to where? And early religion will say, well, it's a journey to heaven. Now, heavens are conceived in a similar way in most religions. That is a kind of post-mortem condition, which is a refined variety of what we have here today. And this is no sorrow, and we live infinitely. But infinite is not meant timeless, it's not meant forever. It's meant for an inestimable period of time in human understanding and calculation. But at some point or other, we have to continue our journey. We have to carry on. So immediately there's this understanding that life itself has a cycle to it. We can observe this in nature. We can see how a seed becomes a tree and a tree becomes a seed. And we can also see that from a material point of view. Is there such a thing as death, or is there only transformation of one form to another? And the answer is very clear. We only find transformative change. We don't find a perpetual change or something absolutely beginning and absolutely finishing. It's just a continuation of everything. And so this is not very satisfactory. If you answer or ask this question, all right, we understand that after this human body goes, then we can, if we lead a good life, we can go to that realm where we'll find our parents and our associates, our family, and so on, the land of the Pitra, the ancestors. But that doesn't seem very satisfactory. It does not answer the question, which is the third boon. And the third boon is, can you please tell me the answer to this question? Some people say that after death there is existence, and some say there's non-existence. And this is a question that remains even today. Today, materialist atheists are arguing this question and saying, is there really any meaning or purpose to life? Or should we just make the best of what we have here? Because when we snuff it, when we go and our life snuffs out, there's a wonderful saying that, snuffing, because like a candle flame, and it gets snuffed out, then that's it. There's only darkness remains. Some say that's the case. Others will say, no, there's existence. Well, what is that existence? This is a very, very difficult question because it's very subtle. Our whole interpretation of what is reliant on what the eyes see, what the ears hear. The sense organs report a sense world, a world of material objects that have certain size, certain quality, hardness, softness, etc. And then this comes in the form of people who can make things pleasant or awkward for us as well. And we can see some internal world there, some reaction to what we find. And ultimately, we see that it is painful. Where is the pain coming from? It's coming from all the outside objects. Of course, objects themselves can't cause anything. It's the reaction that causes the difficulty. And so these are some profound questions because they're to do with fear of losing one's own existence. It's to do with pain, grief. There is no more serious pain, as we said last time, than the pain of bereavement. The question of birth and death and dying occupies thousands and thousands and thousands of pages of books. There's one great expert on this. Her name was Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. She managed to find out all the stages that we go through in bereavement. But bereavement is a grand version of what we experience on a day-to-day basis when we get disappointed. When we have an expectation, and then the expectation becomes a disappointment, we can't fulfill it, then we go through a stage of, I can't believe it, disbelief. I can't believe this happened to me. And then the next will come blaming. It's their fault. Then it's, oh, it's my fault. Then there's guilt. And then there's anger, of course. So all of these come about. And for somebody suffering from loss of any kind, it seems that this pattern has to be gone through. Not necessarily sequentially, by the way. And so we are struggling with this because life is very painful. We don't normally register it in that way. That's the peculiar dichotomy of our existence. We normally think everything is fine, but it's only fine as long as we are plain sailing. When something overturns our boat or a great wind comes and pushes us off course, then we want to try and find some solution to this. At every moment in time, there is a choice that has to be made. We can register this if we have a sense of alertness, if we stay awake and watch all the things going through our mental field. We can see that there's the opportunity for continuous choice. And this choice we can put a little humorously as PE. PE when I was at school was the subject of physical education. I'm not sure if they describe that in schools today, but physical education. We can use that and say, yes, there are two paths, and these paths are divergent. They're leading to different effects. So the one path can be put as a P, which is perfection, the path toward perfection. There is an inner drive within us that wants to do better. And the basis for that is our nature is absolutely perfect. We don't know it. So this striving for perfection on the basis that we can't really realize it, we don't really know it, and yet we want to strive for it and make every effort toward it. That's the one path that is put toward us. The other path that is put to us is the path that stands for E, which is enjoyment. So we have perfection on the one side, enjoyment on the other. Faced with painful difficulties, many people, I would even say most people, will choose the path of enjoyment. And this leads to a regression. Now, there's a psychological principle in all of this, which is a causal principle, but it's also a mechanical principle, that everything that comes within our range that we react to, whether positively or negatively, gets settled in an unconscious area, a kind of library or storehouse of events. It gets stored on a kind of disk, and all these impressions we call samsara, or related to samsara, the world around us, we call subtle impressions, samskaras. Samskaras, subtle impressions, subtle because they sit there and we're unaware of their existence. Last weekend, we were doing a dream interpretation workshop. One of the techniques in trying to access the unconscious area that comes out in dreams is to do what is called a word association. That is to try and tap into the unconscious area and find out what is the reaction to a word. Something like abstract painting. The key to abstract art is to try and capture the spontaneous events going on in the mental field. And they happen so rapidly. Something like doodling. Somebody's talking on the telephone, absent-mindedly with the right hand. If you're right-handed, you may be drawing something, or you may be putting geometric patterns. And these are not planned. These are coming out from the unconscious area. So it is this build-up of experiences that sits there in an unconscious area and comes out. It comes out as our personality. It comes out as our reactiveness. It comes out as a spontaneous surfacing of all the old friends from childhood. And we may even say, bearing in mind this idea of recycling and cycling, that it comes even from previous experiences, previous life. If you would take the whole totality of life, organic life even, then you'd be inclined to say that the unfolding of life or evolution is an accumulation of all these experiences resulting in what we call instinct. A duck is born. Instinctively, it waddles off to the water. A mammal is born. Instinctively, it knows how to suckle. And it is this understanding of accumulated experience that gives us the explanation for it and tells it is all from our previous experience. Now, if we trace our history back, we can trace it all the way back to a single cell bacteria that has a will to understand its environment and react to it. And as time goes on, it realizes somehow, we can use that language, that it wants to cooperate and coordinate with other cells, make a kind of cooperative of multi-cells. Now you have multi-cell organisms. The human body is such a body. It has multicellular organisms with an inherent knowledge within it. And that is contained within the nucleus of every single cell. We call it the deoxyribonucleic acid. That's the protein description of it. But what it is, it stores all our architectural plans, everything that ever was, everything that ever will be, containing over 100,000 coded messages yet to be unfolded. I think the yogis must have known this when they bring out this concept of kundali, the thing coiled up, kundalini, that thing which is coiled up, an uncoiling of your full potential that Swami Vivekananda beautifully puts as each soul is potentially divine. The goal is to manifest this from within. So when we take the preferable path, we're introducing a kind of catalyst in our efforts. What we are doing is we're accelerating. So this path toward perfection is not only because of a clearer understanding of where we should go, what is the direction we should go in, that's on the one side, but it also indicates the acceleration of all our efforts. The more we do it, the more we reach our goal, as it were, in a quicker way, that is to manifest this divinity from within. And when we say divinity, we're also meaning perfection. There can be nothing more perfect than the sum totality of everything, which is perfect. And so two paths were described, if you recall. And in order to learn this Upanishad tells us that we require a teacher, not teacher from the intellectual point of view, not the standard academic teacher that we're used to, because it doesn't require any purity of mind to teach us mathematics, chemistry, or history. It just requires some kind of knowledge in these subjects, and sometimes doesn't even require any skill in these subjects. But in relation to this particular goal and this particular route, this particular path, we require a teacher who has trodden the path before and recognized and realized the goal that has been reached. And it is not for argumentation. It is not a kind of philosophy that involves speculation. It's not to do with dialectics. It's not to do with the head. In fact, the watchword of the whole of Vedanta is that realization is religion. There was a question asked, I think, some while ago, I think maybe in the Vedanta series question and answer. So what is religion? Or what is the difference between religion and spirituality? Well, nowadays we use the term spirituality to replace the term religion, thinking that religion is an organizational structure full of doctrines and dogmas. But let's for a moment take Swami Vivekananda's oft-quoted and beautiful statement. Very succinctly put, each soul is potentially divine. The goal is to manifest this from within. And then he says that you can control now nature, internal and external, as a result of this. And then he gives the methods. But then he also says that churches, temples, doctrines, dogmas, books, rituals are but secondary details. And it's the secondary details that come out in a popular way as, oh, this is religion. But time and time again, Swami Vivekananda points out that his first postulation, that each soul is potentially divine, that really, and the realization of that is real religion. What we, I suppose, might call spirituality, but that is real religion. So what is religion? Religion is realization. Realization of what? Now, in traditional religions, the phrasing might be perplexing, because if you say realization, some theologies might say realization of your own sinfulness and therefore a requirement for repentance. Some might say realization of the truth of Scripture. Some might say realization of a kingdom of heaven. Now we're getting closer to it. Realization, if we take it in this context, that there is a kingdom of heaven within us, if we take it in this way, then realization means currently in our normal day-to-day setting, we don't realize it, and we behave without realizing it. So we should realize it. Once we realize it, then something new, a new dimension, as it were, opens up for us. If we realize that there is an inheritance within us and we don't know where it is. So Jesus uses this example of a treasure being hidden in the ground and somebody digs it up. But first of all, there may be a speculation about it. We think there's a treasure here. You may want to dig it up. And then, understanding that, you dig and dig, you still don't find it, dig a little bit more, and then you hear some metal. And then you take up a chest, and then you open it up. Ah, there's the treasure. Very good. And because we're humans, of course, orientated more toward material pleasure and material life, it is useful for us to use material examples. Because, of course, Nachiketa is offered all the wealth and all the possessions you can muster. In other words, this enjoyment is offered by Yama. He says, come on, this is very difficult. Even the gods are perplexed by this question. So I'll tell you what, let me grant you everything available in the category of enjoyment. And he mentions a whole list of things. And I think every person who desires to win the lotto will recognize all the benefits that are being presented. But Nachiketa is wiser, and that's what it requires. It requires wisdom. To get this realization, one has to be a recipient. One has to be open to it. No delaying about it, because every move toward enjoyment puts a delaying obstacle in our way. Therefore, it requires concentration. It was these great sages who realized the truth within the Upanishads, who went on a path, this path toward perfection, which involves introspection and culminating in meditation, but both require concentration. If you define what is concentration, concentration is that mental process that shortens or that gives us an absence of the sense of time. Directing our attention in a certain way, we forget. It was recorded that the great composer Beethoven, and I'm sure you know I'm a great fan of him and his music, there were very great similarities between Beethoven and Swami Vivekananda. Romain Rolland picks this up in terms of how Vivekananda is phrasing like great rhythms in the Beethoven's music, great melodies that he makes. And Beethoven himself felt he had a direct access to the divine in his music. And I have no doubt about that it comes from the superconscious area, all these things. But it's recorded that Beethoven had no understanding of when to eat or what to eat. So immersed in him was he in his task of uncovering and discovering this great music that all sense of time was lost to him. We know this from our conventional phrases when we say, oh, I don't know where the time went, or the time went so quickly. is at that time already. And we know that the mind has been occupied in a very deliberate and concentrated way. So it requires this concentration, and it is not easy because this truth is hidden inside even the atom. It is so subtle that the smallest thing we can ever think of, it is subtler than the smallest thing, and it is vaster than the vastest thing. And it is always said, in almost all Upanishads, the image is given that it is hidden. It's hidden inside the human heart. This is in self a picture that is useful in meditation, to think that if you peel off all the layers of the human persona, the physical, the mental, the intellectual, even the energetic before the mental, and like that, layers after layers, the Taittiriya Upanishad gives us a useful way of thinking of it, like peeling an onion, one layer, then another one, then another one. Or you might say like removing Russian dolls, one from another. Taittiriya Upanishad mentions these as sheaths. Something is within something, within something, within something, until you remove each one. And there you find that subtle thing that is within. And what is it? Described as the cave of the heart. Now, the advantage of this beautiful metaphor is that a cave is normally dark, and you enter into it. And when you enter into it, you normally have to strike a match, or you normally have to light a lamp, or maybe switch a torch on, and then the cave lights up. And what is there? We find, unlike us revealing what is there with the torch in the beginning, that may be so, there is something within it that is self-effulgent, something that is lighting it from within, conveniently put for meditation purposes of the size of a thumb. And so it is through this process of introspection and meditation that we realize this subtle thing. Some people say, oh, I can't meditate. Meditation is very hard, very difficult. And yet, if we are to get that intimate, direct connection, that direct perception, all of us, every human, will have to undertake this process of meditation, this introspective journey and this meditation, beginning with a choice. Let me take this path, the path of perfection, what is termed as the preferable versus the pleasurable. And then in reviewing this as to where we are now, the question comes up, what becomes of us when we die? And then the text tells us very, very succinctly, and this is where we left off last time, and this is how it correlates with the Bhagavad Gita, that if you think that you are slain, and if you think you are a slayer, if you think that you kill, if you think that you can be killed, then you are under a misapprehension. You're under a delusion, because neither takes place. If you think you're a victim, or if you think you're a perpetrator, both of these positions are incorrect. Because this entity that stands within is neither slayed, nor is it slain. Now we can understand this in the context of the Bhagavad Gita, but the Katha Upanishad I mentioned last time, why would this arise? So there seems to be a correlation between the Bhagavad Gita and this Katha Upanishad. There's no doubt. There are seemingly almost parallel passages within it. The point is not that. The point is, who knows this? That neither being killed or killer, neither point of view is true as real, because this entity does not die when the body dies. This is the difference between Atman and Jiva. Jiva, that accumulation of experiences that carries on, minus a body even, with a body It's still jiva. Then minus the body is still that entity which we can translate as soul. The soul carries on its journey. It doesn't stop. It has a purpose. It has to arrive at a point of perfection. And when we look at it, we see all our efforts in every endeavor in life is this perfection. Even in careers, I want to be better in my career. I want to be a better student. I want to do better. I want to outdo the other person. I want to be competitive. I want to do the best I possibly can. I want to do an MA, and then I want to do a doctorate, and then I want to study in that field and this field. All the time manifesting our full potential until we come to this point of realization that having done that, the perfection itself shines self-evident for itself. It was always there. And if it was always there, then in a sense, we don't have to strive for it. In a sense. As long as we feel we're embodied, we always have to struggle for it. Yes. But if it is there all the time, always full and free and perfect, not going anywhere, not coming, not going, not being born, not dying, therefore, then the question doesn't even arise. It is only from our point of view, when we think I am the body, or I am an individual, or even I am a soul, that this question arises: what becomes to me after death? And so the subtle point has to be given. And then we come to the whole beautiful metaphorical image of a chariot. So this is essentially the catch up on where we left.
Swamiji?
Yes.
Swamiji, you said Jiva and Atman. What's the difference, Swamiji?
Okay. So Jiva literally means something living. And for something to live, it must be a number of different things put together. If you take the simplest thing that lives, namely a bacteria, it still has parts. It still has a membrane wall. It still has the capacity to replicate. So it has a function, it has activity, and it has the urge to continue living. Now, all jivas, all living beings, all living things, or things that want to live, a most sophisticated variety of that is called mankind. So that is jiva. Jiva is the sum totality of a person, and when the body is finished and dies, there's still that jiva. But behind the jiva, when all the layers are gone, in other words, when the attachment to our identity is gone, to our individual personhood is gone, this is called, what remains is called Atman, literally self. The rest is not the self. So this continuous discernment has to go on. What is the self? What is not the self? And this really relates to these two paths. These two paths are perfection and enjoyment. And we should play this game of PE with great enthusiasm. But only the wise know this. Only the wise do not grieve. When we think that a person is an individual and that recognizable element goes, namely the body goes off, we mourn, we grieve, because we're under the misapprehension that there is an object, that the subject and object are mixed up. The body is an object. It's an object of our scrutiny and comes within a whole context, as we often discuss, of a waking experience. But what happens when the waking state moves on? Then we experience a dream world. The experiencer, that continuous entity which gets mixed up. So let me put it in a different way. This eternal perfect entity called Atman seems to get mixed up with the objective world of mind and body and energy. And this confusion is also a delusion. I am this, I am that. It's to get out of that. That is our purpose in life. The Atman remains. In the language of the Gita, water cannot wet it. See, air cannot dry it, fire cannot burn it. And it's not going anywhere. This is a very important thing to understand, because this is the panacea for all our pain and grief. To understand this one point. But it is only the wise who know this. The wise don't grieve over the living or the dead. Now, the fact that we grieve means we're fools. And then we want to reincarnate, but it's reincarnation of foolishness. That's all. And at some point, we may realize this is not giving us what we want. Any effort toward this goal of perfection is not being realized by so-called conventional means. We have to change our understanding of the world and change our behavior, and we have to embark on a purification process. This is realized by the purified mind. All these efforts, what we call yoga, that Swami Vivekananda in his statement describes as work or worship or psychic control or philosophy, one or more or all of these, are simply performing a function of purification. They are not there to directly make a realization. They are there to bring the mind to a condition where realization occurs. That's what is meant by realization. So we have to be clear what we mean. Atman is one thing. Jiva is Atman plus all the other things.
Okay, Swamiji. So the wisdom lies in realizing that the identity should be with the Atman, not the Jiva. And therefore, because it's not being born, so it's not dead. So we don't have to grieve.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Is it easy? No, it's not easy, because as Katha Upanishad will also tell us that it is like walking on the edge of a razor. And but he also says, because that same passage that contains a wonderful encouragement, which Swami Vivekananda translates in a very general way, beautiful way. Is it? So, Utishta Jagra Prapyavaran Nibodhata. See? And he translated it, arise, awake, stop not until the goal is reached. Now, even analyzing that is very useful, because it requires alertness. If we are continuously walking on the razor's edge, some people could interpret that in a traumatic way, in a fearful way. There's that statement, walking on eggshells, walking in a state of perpetual fear. But that's not what this is meant. That's not what this means. And we also have an expression, razor-sharp intellect. The person has a razor-sharp intellect. So we can take the implications of both of these. We require a razor-sharp intellect. We require to be a keen observation point to see what is coming in, what impressions come into what we call the mental field, the mind as such. It's a field because we can observe it, we can see what's going on, and we can change it. We can change our reactions. I mentioned that we can't change our first reaction because that's a habitual reaction. So we can observe it. Then we can see what happened. And then using the benefit of every single moment, every single second, where every second requires a choice. Then we see, oh, I see, let us revalue everything. Okay, let us put a different reaction in. But let us not wait for something unfortunate to come. Let us train the mind by constantly repeating values such as strength and truth and beauty and love and goodness and harmony in moments where the mind would tend to wander somewhere. We observe, okay, you're wandering off. Come. Let us occupy you usefully. This is called occupational therapy. We have to give the mind occupational therapy. We have to keep it busy all the time because it is always busy anyway. And its business is either in our favor or not. And if it's not in our favor, this is the path of the enjoyment. And if it is in our favor, this is called the preferable path to perfection. We have to play a game like that. So we have to arise, we have to be energetic, we have to occupy the mind. We have to be awake and alert constantly as part of the game. If you're not alert in the game of tennis, a ball going at several great speed. I don't know exactly what speed they serve balls at Wimbledon, but it's a huge speed. We have to be careful. If that hits you in the eye, then that's a serious injury. More so with cricket, which is a very hard ball. If that hits you on the head, then that's pretty dangerous. So nowadays in cricket, they have all these protection gear to minimize that. So we have to be extremely careful about what we select should be the subject matter that the mind becomes entertained with. And we can use the propensity for the mind to be entertained in meditation. We can occupy with a better entertaining way. Entertaining it with thoughts of truth and beauty and goodness and love, with scenes that were inspiring, with feelings that were inspiring or are inspiring, and replace that. As soon as we saturate the mind with a revalued sense, we start building up a different bank deposit in the unconscious mind. We start building up a buffer for these moments that can become shaky for us. So using a razor-sharp wit is necessary. Being alert and awake is necessary. So arise, yes, get up from any lethargy that you might feel or any casual attitude. Awake, wake up, be alert, and be determined. Don't stop until the goal is reached. Don't give up. So there's a positive aspect to this walking on the edge of the razor. First of all, acknowledge that it's not an easy thing, but don't be dispirited because we have the capacity to arise and wake up. On what basis? On the basis that we don't have to get our perfection. Perfection is already there. We just have to uncover what is already there. So these are some of the messages there in the Upanishad. Let us pick up then where we left off, and I think it was the second chapter. I think it was the 18th stanza we picked up on. And prior to that, of course, we mentioned the value of this Om, and we went through that. And then we said that this was a great support. But here it is, and we'll repeat actually what we discussed last time. Na jayate mrinyate va vibhashin nayam kudashin na babhuva kashit. And we can also say, Ajo nityaha shashvato ayam purano na hanyate hanyamane sharire. It is never born. The knowing soul is not born. It does not die. It has not come into being from anything, and nor has anything come from it. This unborn, this eternal, this everlasting ancient one suffers no destruction, even when the body is being destroyed. If you ask what is the Atman, what is a Jiva, we are here describing Atman. It is this Atman that is being told. Let us analyze this a little bit further in each one. We take this passage here. And what we'll do is we'll use the translation. If you're following the 8 Upanishads, so the translation from Swami Vivekananda's 8 Upanishads. I think the sun is catching me here. Let me just change. Yeah. Beautiful sunny day here, by the way. So the intelligent self. The intelligent self. That means the knowing soul is neither born nor does it die. The body is born. The body dies. This knowing soul, that is this entity that is aware, that is this intelligent self, is neither born nor does it die. And it didn't originate from anything. It didn't come from anything. Now, if it's true here, it's also true everywhere. So we can also say that the universe, despite what we think, despite all our cosmology, it didn't originate from anything. It didn't originate from it. It is birthless, it is eternal, it is undecaying, and it is ancient. When we analyze these terms, we can see that everything else that we know of has birth. Everything that we know of has its expiry date, its shelf life. Everything that we know of is decays. Everything that has parts will disintegrate, is assembled and will dissemble. And it is everything that we know of is not that ancient. Every moment is fresh. And it's not injured even when the body is killed. So this Vipashit, this intelligent one, intelligent of course because its nature of consciousness is never lost. And Najayate is not born, it's not produced, doesn't die, Navam Bariyate, an impermanent thing that has origination, is subject to many modifications. And so the commentator says, Shankaracharya, with a view to denying all the modifications in the self, the first and last of these modifications in the form of birth and death, and what's in between, are being first denied here in the text. Therefore, ayam, this self, is birthless. It's ajaha, it's nityaha, it's eternal, and it's shashvataha, undecaying. That which is impermanent is subject to decay, but this one is everlasting. Therefore, again, it is puranaha, it is ancient. It is new indeed, even in the past. A thing is said to be new now, which emerges into being through the development of all its parts. For example, a pot. The self, however, is opposed to them. You ask a pot, who are you? It might say, I'm a pot, this is my shape. I was born on a clay wheel, a wheel that was used for being fashioned. Somebody fashioned me. This is the creation idea, that the Lord of the universe fashioned me from an unknown substance called clay. It doesn't ask, where did this clay come from? The unknowing pot will say, I am a pot. I was born in this moment. When somebody smashes me, then I will die. The knowing pot will say, I am clay. I always was clay. I always will be clay. That is my substance. So it is not killed. Na hanyate, it is not killed, not injured. Sharire, hanya mane, when the body is killed with weapons and so on. Though it exists there, just like space. And so if the slayer thinks of it in terms of killing, and if the killed thinks of it as killed, both of them do not know. It does not kill, nor is it killed. even though the self is of this kind. If someone looks upon the mere body as the self and thinks of it, then he's under this delusion. Now, all we're doing here really is catching up, because I realized this is where we left off last time. And so I wanted to bring you up to speed, as it were, and expand on where we left off. And then the next question comes, it comes from Shankaracharya. How again does one know the self? This is to be said. It's all very well saying, this is the nature of the self, but then how do we free ourselves from this delusion? Then it goes on to tell us, instead of directly answering the question, it tells us of the nature of the self itself, that it is subtler than the subtle, greater than the great. In fact, it is telling us what it is not, and that it is lodged in the heart of every creature. Now he tells the method. A desireless person sees the glory of the self through the serenity of the organs, and thereby becomes free from sorrow. This is our goal. Now, Shochachi, freeing from self, does not grieve. Now, here's an overview, therefore, of the method. You have to be desireless. It starts off by choosing whether you want to go toward the path of perfection or the path of enjoyment. It begins there. But there has to be some motive behind it. And grief is a very good motive, a good motivator. Pain is a good teacher. And so, Nachiketa himself has suffered the pain. Father also suffered the pain. And so, what is it desireless? Nachiketa has already demonstrated his desirelessness. Having been offered all these things, desirable things, he's turned them all down. So it doesn't tell us then how to cultivate this desirelessness. This has to be elucidated even more. And so, after a long commentary there, the self is difficult to be known, no doubt, by ordinary people who are possessed of desire, because while sitting it travels far away, while sleeping it goes everywhere. But who but I can know that deity who is both joyful and joyless? This is the 21st stanza, and we will pick this up next week, next Saturday, when we continue our study of the Katha Upanishad. We'll leave it there. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto all.